We can prove that in antiquity our forefathers made gigantic signs in the ground, like today's crop circle. Just it was done by our forefathers some thousands of years ago. And all these designs are laid out in a way that they are so big you can see them only from the air. I mean, Nazca in Peru is one of the examples, but it's not only Nazca. In the meantime, because of our flying aircraft, because of our helicopters, we found gigantic designs dating from prehistory time in Saudi Arabia, in Australia, in today's Jordania. Then even here in the United States, in California, a place called Blythe. You see figures in the ground, you can see them only from the air. In Mexico, in the Sonora Desert, there are hundreds of designs which you can see only from the air. And the main mystery is definitely Nazca in Peru. I was so many times in Nazca. I made myself over 5,000 pictures of Nazca. I show you here now pictures of Nazca which were never shown on television. And you really are shocked when you see these designs and look at them carefully. Until today, the scientific community has come up with the following information. All these designs on the ground is an astronomical calendar. It made no sense. Then they say it was a cult for the water gods. Another scientist suggested now it was a cult for the mountain gods. I read always in scientific magazines, now it is a cult for agriculture. My God, this is ridiculous. There was never agriculture. It's too hot for it. If in every time something was growing there, green, then you would not see the designs anymore. We have had in the scientific community so many explanations, and every scientist thinks this is plausible. That's the next natural explanation. It's all nonsense. Just look at these gigantic lines. This is eye-openers. And on television, you never see these pictures. I have 5,000 of them. In Nazca, there you see some mountains which were artificially cut off. You never see these mountains on television. Somebody cut the top of the mountain off. You can clearly prove it in the pictures. Normal mountains around Nazca, they come to the top from both sides. And you see, it's the top of the mountain. Then you see one mountain where the whole top is cut off. And there is a line on this mountain. And under the line looking like an airstrip, starting abruptly, ending abruptly. Under the line is a zigzag line. No idea, no suggestion what this was. I simply suggest, or in this case I speculate, it has something to do with flying. You see, today we need electromagnetic impulses, for example, to start machines. Magnetic. It could be something inside. We have sent a scientific crew to Nazca, and I have asked the scientists a few questions which archaeologists would never ask. Archaeologists ask for datings, for bones, for fireplaces and all these things. I ask, for example, please go to the desert of Nazca with your modern equipment and measure the resistance of electricity. What is the resistance of electricity? If I have a 100 volt, and then I have a measuring device, and I want to see if the electricity is flowing, so I can measure the flow of electricity. And I wanted to know from the scientific world, does the electricity flow in Nazca? Is it the same flowing as in the desert or on these so-called lines? They made their scientific measurements, and as expected, in the desert, in the sand, there is no flowing electricity, because sand is an isolator, like ceramic is an isolator. But then they made the same experience on the lines with that cut-off mountain, where the zigzag lines around them. And the speed of the electrical resistance was 8,000 times higher than just a few meters in the desert. So there is something. I asked the scientists, can you measure magnetic fields in Nazca? Is there something wrong? Of course, there are changements in the magnetic field, and especially on the lines. On that mountain, they found a magnetic field in the ground under the line, which is so high that they could not measure it anymore. So there is something behind it, but nobody knows what it is, and nobody is allowed to go there or make diggings. So we know that something is wrong in Nazca, because we can measure the flow of electricity, the difference in the sand and the difference in the so-called lines. We can definitely measure the changing of the magnetic field. On the zigzag line, there is something deep down there. But in practice, one would say, okay, so make a hole. What's so difficult there? It's not possible. Nazca is completely protected. You don't receive the permission to simply scratch a little stone away. If you do something, you are immediately arrested. You get in jail in Peru, and you have to pay about $10,000 to get out again. So we know by measurement something is wrong in Nazca, but in practice, we have no possibility to check it. It might be that in gigantic temple structures, for example, the pyramid, or in big other temple structures, there might be changing of the magnetic field or electricity, but nobody measures it. We have only measured it in Nazca, and there it's true, we can prove it. I know from my knowledge of ancient texts, of ancient mythologies, that some thousands of years ago, a gigantic mother spaceship was surrounding around the Earth. Now this mothership, spaceship, after a long trip, they need something to refuel. I mean, is it organic material? Is it uranium? Is it whatever? So they measure the planet. Where could we find something? Maybe they are looking for gold. And from an orbit, they can measure where we find gold or whatever. Now they simply send an automatic space probe down. An automatic space probe would not need a landing strip. It simply came down like one of our satellites. And before it came to a standstill, it might be that this automatic space probe is blowing away some sand and stones and etc. before it comes to a standstill. One of the natives was watching this. Something was coming from the guards, from the sky. And this space probe makes some measurements. Hello, what is the magnetic field here? Do we find gold, uranium, or whatever? And disappears again. Another native goes to his tribe and say, hey, something was descending from the guard. I saw it here on the plain of Nazca. And you see a small line simply created by the blown away stone and sand. And now the natives may think, obviously the gods want that we make some lines for them. And it becomes a religion, a cult. And the natives now make lines in all kinds of directions. Small lines, large lines, thin lines, long lines. The longest of the small lines in Nazca is 23 kilometers long, over cross mountain hill straight away, 23 kilometers. The longest of the airstrip looking lines is 3.8 kilometers long. Enough to land the jumbo jet. Now, that was my suggestion. The lines were made by the natives because it has become a religious cult. But that's not all. The extraterrestrials, in fact, they found something there, something which they used. We have no idea what it used. And they took it off from Nazca. It was the extraterrestrials, not the natives, who cut the mountain, because something which they needed was in there. By cutting off the mountain, you have debris. There is nothing in Nazca. Where is all this debris which they took off from the cutting mountain? And maybe they had an automatic landing machine, and the landing machine was working on a magnetic field. And for the magnetic field, they need that zigzag line under the line, because with the zigzag line, you compose an electromagnetic field. So it comes to a standstill, and you pull it the other way around, and you start it again. The local people made with the figures. You see, you have in the ground, you have figures of fishes, spiders, monkeys, birds, and this kind of thing. And these figures were made by the local. You know, Nazca is very, very hot. The surface of the desert of Nazca is composed of little brown stones, and sand. Now you have only to use your shoes and to scratch away these little brown stones, and you see itself a higher, bright shining level appears. And with this you can in fact make these figures. There is no mystery in making the figures. You can also make some lines. This is also possible by scratching away with your shoes the surface of it. But the large lines, starting abruptly, ending abruptly, the large big lines on mountains which are cut off are not made by scratching away with your shoes. Here technology was used, so you have to differentiate. There was high technology, in my eyes, from extraterrestrials, which has to do with the cut-off mountains, the zigzag lines and these things, and there is imitations of the natives. Even after the extraterrestrials left, when they have received what they wanted, the natives continue to make lines in honors of the god. So you have both there, high technology from extraterrestrials and simply primitive lines made by the natives. If they use technology, the gods, they would give a gigantic sign in the sky. They would show something big that everyone can see us. For example, they could show with a laser a sign on the moon. We have full moon and we have empty moon. Now there's nothing and an empty moon, and all of a sudden you see a gigantic inscription on the moon. This would be technology. But on the other hand, I'm sure the information is within us, is in our genes, and we continue to give this information to the next generation, and our genetics will find out that we are not only humans. We have been influenced by an artificial mutation by extraterrestrials, so we will find the answers anyhow. It makes no sense to be against all this hypothesis of an extraterrestrial visit in the past, because everything points to it, and the final answer is in us, and our genetics will find it.